Okay. We're gonna see how much we can get through here. Because I feel like I'm so close to getting to the end. So close. I can taste it almost. All right. So, so we're talking about Schottelheim. This is basically Ernst Rohm is going to jail, basically. So we're basically covering some of the facts, kind of how his case is going to go. And this is basically 1923. This is the results of everything that happened on November 8th and 9th, 1923, where he came in and two of his guys got killed. So that's just a little reminder for folks. We're going to continue on here. We heard of the lot which had befallen Hitler, Kriebel, Rosbach, and Goering, and discovered that other colleagues amongst them, Ponner, Frick, Seidel, and Bruckner, were being held at Neudeck Remand Prison. At Landsberg, amongst others, were Streicher, Amann, and Prince Verda. We were overjoyed to learn that the people of Munich had begun holding rallies on our behalf. The Commissioner General, who had served the fatherland, ruled his beloved people from behind barbed wire and machine guns, as we found out. He had been an officer of the Territorial Reserve, but had never been near the front line during the Great War, and it almost seemed as though he wanted to make up for it now. The Reichswehr state and local police were apparently not always the recipients of the people's goodwill. The mounted police in particular were often called upon to disperse riots, using skills of horsemanship which were probably worthy of better use. The people of Munich repaid this kindness by naming them ironically Danube Cossacks, a term which will be well understood by students of local history. Even in these organs of state themselves, there is no real harmony or satisfaction. Officers and men were often incensed at the jobs they were given, and it took time and effort to restore or reinforce discipline and willingness to accept duties. Many officers preferred to resign rather than expose themselves to long-term conflicts of duty and conscience, while others were happy to stage confrontations for the sake of honor every day without regard to the consequences. The names of Colonel Heerl and Captain Ritter von Krosser deserve special mention in this respect. After honorable discharge from the army, they devoted all their energies to the Völkisch struggle. Many NCOs and private soldiers were the equal of their officers in the courage of their convictions. The disbanding and banning of our brigades, the suppression of all public activities of a Völkisch nature, and the gaggling of our press and publications came to our ears. In the same day we heard the self-sacrificial resistance of loyally disposed friends. We greeted with satisfaction the founding of the Kampfbund of German workers, later the Deutsch Völkisch Offizierbund, at the instigation of Captain Weiss, led by General Achter. Thus there were still men out there holding our banner high. The fact that officers were taking the lead pleased me all the more, for I viewed these officers' associations with great reserve. From 1923, I no longer saw the need for them, for in my opinion, officers belonged in brigades with their soldiers. There was obviously some call for these associations when the professional knowledge of membership was worth preserving and promoting, but now most opportunities for the care of the members were exhausted, and they spent their time in reflections on the past. That is the case today, as it was then. Accordingly, most of the officers' associations either did not understand the events of November 1923 or simply rejected them. The aim of their politics was to be apolitical and allow themselves to be drawn uncritically by the tow rope of the state. Therefore, non-political politicians. An insight into the thought processes of the chairman of the Bavarian Officers Associations is provided in an appeal issued by them on 9 November 1923, which I repeat here in unabridged form. To all officers, medical and veterinary officers, and officials of the old army, in line with the opinion and will of the all-highest warlord, and from their own feelings of duty, the three Bavarian Officers Associations have placed themselves behind the Commissioner General of State without reserve from the first day. The Kampfbund Compromise of the SA of the NSDAP, Oberland, and Reichskriegsflagge had previously taken a stance which in no way excluded support from the Commissioner General. Now the Kampfbund, by its violent and unheard-of procedure of the night of 8 November 1923 in Munich, has adopted a stance opposing the Commissioner General, and with it the will of our highest warlord, who remains loyal to the Commissioner General and may therefore be in danger. You former officers, medical and veterinary officers, and officials of the old army who remained loyal to your oath, rush to the support of your all highest warlord and Commissioner General. Hold yourself ready to protect them with your lives. This is not a question relating to the realization of dynastic matters, but a service for the welfare of the Bavarian and German fatherlands. Follow immediately the call of your officers' association. Leave the Kampfbund. Bear in mind that if you remain in it, you will eventually be separated from your all highest warlord and your old comrades. Our Bavaria cannot heal, nor can it fulfill its mission in the right if pro-fatherland circles fight against the man who is clearly acting in a pro-fatherland way and who has received power in his hands to bring about those healthy circumstances as we understand them. The chairman of the local groups and regimental officers' associations are requested to make all members who can be contacted aware of this appeal. Officers, insofar as they are not already included in the defense organization set up by Carr, should assemble today from 1700 in the police club in Turkenstrasse. Dress, civilian clothing, white armband, light weapons. Only those officers should attend who find themselves unreservedly, unconditionally behind the Commissioner General and were not involved in yesterday's events against Carr. The outlying local groups and regimental officers' associations may wish to take measures to make their own officers, etc., available to the state authorities of the relevant locality, which will be notified to the Commissioner General. Munich, 9 November 1923. Landesverband, Bayern, German Officers Association League, Bavaria Branch, signed von Tutschew, Lieutenant General retired. National Association of German Officers, Bavaria Branch, signed Rauchenberger, Lieutenant General retired. And the Association of Bavarian Regimental Officers Societies, signed von Taustein, Colonel retired. In contrast to these people, even the Völkisch officers who closed ranks after November proved that they were not politicians, but soldiers. They rejected a policy of if and when, and would not allow the direction of the march to be dictated to them. Much more, they went straight ahead, as per the old soldier's principle, made their own judgment, and held fast to the fighter's standpoint. Looked at from this perspective, I grant that the officers' Kampfbund was justified, that it was even necessary to a certain degree. The following case shows. 27 Bavarian generals declared the Prussian General Ludendorff an outlaw in their eyes for failing to pay homage to, they thought, due to the Crown Prince. The apolitical officers' associations followed the example set by the generals and excluded General Ludendorff from their social community. If they were asked what this exclusion really meant, then they admitted that they did not know themselves. Those officers who would not go along with this nonsense were booted out of the associations publicly and then invited to continue on as guests of the association by the back door. The personal quarrel between His Majesty King Ruprecht and General Ludendorff, which I shall mention in more detail later, was thus dragged before the public gaze, burdening every officer with having to choose sides based on his own judgment. This is the way to serve one's king? Besides other unpleasantness, this procedure resulted in the public far and wide, and finally those abroad, taking an interest. The British press, for example, was of the opinion that even a king does not have the right to insult a General Ludendorff. Ludendorff's honor is equal in value to that of a king. The officers' associations who consider themselves to be preservers of personal honor thus expose themselves to advice from foreigners in questions of German honor by washing their dirty laundry in public. Furthermore, and in this way, and in this they were sadly lacking. General Ludendorff was not just a peer of theirs, but an historical personality whose name and achievements the whole world knew and respected. This unpleasant affair brings me now to a consideration of how matters affecting honor were dealt with in circles made up of former officers. The officer of the king, brought up in the environment of the Bavarian royal princes within the Reich of Kaiser Wilhelm I, recognized only the king of Bavaria as the judge of his honor and that of his social level. Manly pride in class or caste consciousness granted this privilege only to the king, and it was not transferable. Since 1918, the social level of officer of the king no longer exists. The king can therefore no longer rule on caste honor, and the preservation of manly honor has reverted to the individual. Honor courts set up by officers' associations can sit in judgment on alleged breaches of the spirit and purpose of the association, for them to claim to be the legatees of the royal privilege as preserver and judge of the caste honor of all former officers of the king is to go too far today. Today, when political events take on their toll, even so, less than in 1918. Our will was strengthened by Volkish officers, but above all by the loyalty and readiness to fight of students. The young academics of 1923 still carried with them that residual spiritual influence from the war, which 110 years earlier had preceded the founding of the Defense and Students Associations, that same spirit which made Langemarck possible and in 1919 breathed life into the Freikorps. What a Prussian minister of culture may attempt to impose on German students' associations in 1927, he would never have dared to do then. His infamous attempt would have come to grief from the outset against the unbending Volkisch and greater German will, which knows no frontier. In place of the spirit of 1923, now we have the spirit of the times, the spirit of 1927 or 1928. Yet, what are you pleased to call the spirit of the times is at heart the spirit of those gentlemen in whom the times are reflected. Today, only the National Socialist Studentenbund is involved in this struggle, in which, in 1923, the entire corps of students, the hope of the folk and fatherland, fought shoulder to shoulder with the financially worst off of their German compatriots. If the military-minded German student does not find his way back to these Volkisch fighting ideals, then I fear that his era will finally be over. The German people as a whole has less understanding today than ever for the tradition of the colors. The manly struggle of ministerial advisor Dr. Roth, incarcerated at Landsberg in protective custody, even though he was a party deputy, should not be forgotten. Nor the unyielding fighting spirit of the much-tested and proven Captains Weiss and Buttmann, themselves unsparing and enthusiastic in the service of the movement. Through his support for Reichsflagge leader Captain Heiss lost a considerable proportion of his following, which joined the Alt-Reichsflagge under Lieutenant Liebel and recognized the Volkisch cause. The volunteer corps of General von Kleinherz, which was 14 companies strong on 9 November, with 2 at full infantry readiness for the field in the administrative headquarters of the Archbishopric, splintered. Captain Ehrhardt, hoping to recruit the scattered following to his own flag, was met by indignant refusal. It seems to me that this once strong Freikorps leader has fallen off somewhat since March 1920 to languish in quieter, broader streams and in the backwaters. Treatment in prison was tolerable. The government was a typical official who went by the book. Everything was orderly and as prescribed. Anything over and above issue which one required had to be applied for in writing or by personal request to the governor. I avoided this. The first time I was told the procedure, I declined and told the principal officer, I am not used to requesting but to giving orders. Napoleon said on his prison island, where I cannot give orders, there I am silent. I could not follow his lead absolutely, From time to time, I had to let off steam orally or in writing. The wardens, the warders, most of them on our side being old soldiers themselves, did all they could within the rules to lighten our burden. My cell was always scrupulously clean, and it was their pride. It was their pride and joy. I had it cleaned and scrubbed daily by two young men of the company. I paid for their services by giving them the greater part of my rations. From time to time, the prison medical officer, Dr. Giesendorfer, would visit and alleviate the tedium of the day for a while. Only when we were taken along corridors and through courtyards for interrogations or visits did we come into contact with other inmates of Stadelheim. Occasionally, groups of prisoners crossed the exercise yard while we were there at midday. Now and again, a head would poke through one of the fanlights above the barred windows and shout a greeting. On the whole, we never heard an unfriendly word or saw a face distorted with hate, even though we belonged to the wicked officer caste, which, as everyone knows, is the enemy of the workers, and we were still wearing uniforms, medals, and wore the black, white, red cockade on our caps for show. Much more so, our compatriots showed us fitting respect and a certain goodwill. The bond of common fate creates a solidarity which in some strange way overrides social status, convention, and origins. I had plenty of time and opportunity to observe other prisoners and form an impression about these people, ostracized by society. Though Stadelheim was only a remand and short sentence prison, it was nonetheless valuable for my purposes for all that. My men were there for crimes against property, some committed from need, others by reason for faulty upbringing, abusive treatment, or devious inclination. While these minor offenders served time, the big crooks circulated in Germany, plundering people and state and driving through the streets like lords in their 60-horsepower Mercedes. Is it any surprise if some poor devil confuses mine and thine when he sees the nouveau riches who have robbed the people in their distress, left, right, and center, and now are splashing out shamelessly? Bourgeois society and the law does not despise notorious crooks and antisocial parasites, provided they are wealthy. Even if the provenance of their wealth is dubious, rather it bestow upon them recognition and prestige. Small-time crooks, however, who land up in prison after one false step are ostracized and become pariahs of a society that then denies them respect, work, and bread. Thus they come to reoffend and return to prison, their sanctuary. The state combats the effects but leaves the causes in place. That's a lot of good social commentary there. When crime rises as a result of need, misery, and unemployment, the state does not attempt to alleviate the problem with all means at its disposal. It simply increases the numbers of police and prisons. The state and police are today the bulwark of society and order. Personal ability, value, and achievement count for nothing. Appearances are everything. Not whether a man is a crook or a coward, all that matters is that he does not become enmeshed by the law and no scandal attaches to him. Hypocrisy and Phariseeism reign and are the prominent symptoms of society's malaise. This is most striking when one studies its morality. Nothing is more phony than the so-called morality of society. The term shelters every kind of loose conduct. I want to state straight away that I am no goody-goody, and I do not wish to be considered as such, and neither am I morally upright, for in my experience the morals of a morally upright are not so far removed from looseness. Those who drip morality outwardly are either secretly immoral or would very much like to be if only the opportunity would present itself. Once again, very good commentary, I would say. I leave aside the question of whether the street girl openly plying her trade does not have higher morals than those moral aesthetes who disguise their true personalities. When so-called statesmen leaders When so-called statesmen, leaders of the people, and so on hold forth on morality, it is mostly proof of their inability to think of anything more constructive, or that what they could really like to do is impossible of achievement. That press, and leaders should jump on the bandwagon. Kowtowing to society is something of which I do not approve. Their prudishness does not seem revolutionary, but absurd and reactionary. They should leave it to the shield bearers of today's bourgeois society. One is not surprised to come across a clique of volkish literary people. Most of them never served in the field and experienced the war from a safe haven. The battle of culture and morality is far and away more comfortable and less dangerous than a murderous battlefield where from time to time one can get shot at. Apart from that, it looks good. The soldier turns away from this kind of false morality in disgust. What mattered to me in the field was not whether a soldier measured up to society's morals, but only whether he was a dependable man or not. And a moral man who achieves something is far more acceptable than a morally upright fellow who accomplishes nothing. So-called society commits no greater sin and inflicts no greater harm than it does in this way. Suicides of the best people speak only too eloquently here. If the increasing suicides amongst students rudely awaken the society of patented morality from its self-satisfied slumber, no doubt its pious gaze will see the degeneracy of today's youth. In my opinion, however, it is simply untrue that most of our youth, especially those from amongst the proletarian masses, are any worse than their predecessors. No. Despite the disastrous effects of the war, despite shortages of food and housing, despite forced unemployment, all these things for which society and not youth bears the blame. Youth has its high ideals and advocates them openly and joyfully. NSDAP youth, those in the militia, and even those in the proletarian self-defense brigades are evidence of this. The fault comes from elsewhere. They do not feel right in the dual morality of the bourgeois Philistines and can no longer distinguish between truth and error. Only seldom do they have a teacher at their side who not only imparts knowledge and wisdom, but also encouragement from the heart. The dull as ditchwater schoolmaster will lull the bourgeois listener with his unctuous and unwavering condemnation of spoiled youth, of which he actually knows nothing and understands less. In truth, these tragedies are the result of a social order which replaces healthy recognition of natural processes and understanding with hypocrisy, lies, deceit, prudery, and misplaced indignation. If the state thinks it can regulate human instincts or divert them all along other channels by force of law, that seems to me so amateurish and inappropriate that it does not surprise me to find that the lawmakers of the state are also the defenders of the social order. Protecting the family and increasing the birth rate through state intervention are ideas which even the night watchmen of this peculiar free state will not adopt. Madness. Madness everywhere. Madness, to quote Richard Wagner's Hans Sachs. I shall conclude by saying the battle against hypocrisy, deceit, and the falseness of this society today must reign with one's very own natural instincts from the cradle, as it were. Only then can the battle be pursued successfully for all. It's kind of interesting, that bit. I just want to say this, talking about protecting the family and increasing the birth rate through state intervention. Both the Soviet Union and, of course, later on, Hitler's Germany had huge amounts of this. This is probably why, we can already see, even in this, that Ernst Rohm and Hitler did not see eye to eye on many things. Now, of course, there's a lot of other issues beyond that. But, anyway, then many outcasts of modern society will no longer sit in prison, and attention can be given to ways and means of restricting the activities of the real criminals. There were some political prisoners at Stadelheim during my stay there, National Socialists who had been sentenced to longish periods of imprisonment for some brawl or other, and communists. I greatly admire the loyalty and devotion of these mostly young people who sacrifice their freedom for their beliefs. The spirit of self-sacrifice with which these radicals fight must even call forth the admiration of their political enemies. They confront themselves in the knowledge that pioneers and revolutionaries sorry folks. Okay. Have always sat in prison. Faint hearts never became emperors. That I should consider National Socialists and Communists together in this respect may well pain some people, and has attracted the scorn of the bourgeois press in the past. Perhaps it has been useful. There is a chasm between the Communists and ourselves, but we respect them and have the same loyalty to our convictions and readiness to make sacrifices for what we believe in. That is German, and also German in the Communists. Say about them what you will. The hate of mediocrity, middle-class values, and appeasement, and the struggle against stepping back are sentiments and goals common to the radical movements. And, dear bourgeois citizen, no fainting, please. I assert that amongst communists, especially members of the Red Front, veteran leagues, there are many first-class soldiers. As a soldier, I preferred their activities to those of the Reichsbanner bound to Parliament. The day will come when these soldiers in the garb of workers will realize the swindling and deceit of their Jewish leaders. Okay, we'll be careful. Or leaders dependent on Jews. Then they will, sooner or more surely by instinct than the bourgeoisie, find the path to which German blood guides them. Do I need to mention the 3 communists who took their own lives in December 1927 because they had not realized their ideals? A neat trick which is developed in many political trials is the levying of fines, so enormous that they cannot possibly be paid, since the victims have spent their last pfennigs on the fatherland and their ideals. While the racketeers outside living it up, the poor devils inside can reflect on why they have nothing. The examples here merit special attention. At the end of March 1925, the trial of my fighting comrade and former colleague, Max Neunzert, ended with his acquittal. He had been locked up for months, together with Hans Schweigart and Richard Bally, on a political murder charge. I was able to visit them often and see for myself their resolve, which no period of remand could weaken. These thefts of freedom in political cases are a scandal. The man in the Munich street has no comprehension of what it means to a mentally active and dynamic personality to be confined to a single cell behind prison walls for weeks and months. I speak here not only of hundreds of communists who have fought fearlessly for their convictions, but also nationalists, men of boundless energy who are left to languish in prisons of the Republic. They are accused and must prove their innocence. Until then, the Republic keeps them locked up as a precaution. Good examples of this legal procedure are the cases of Neunzert and Schweigart. Neunzert spent 10 months, Schweigart more than 2.5 years on remand. Both lost their livelihood. At their trials, they were acquitted for lack of evidence. Perhaps the comfort-loving classes might reflect on these periods of time and understand that it's no easy decision to be a nationalist in Germany. Although these thefts of freedom are supposed to be good for prisoners and help convert them, it is not something we should want to encourage. Rather, it is the case that feelings of ill humor and dissatisfaction turn to hate and the desire for revenge, and traitors have time to perfect their revolutionary ideas. I speak from experience. In Stadelheim, I have plenty of time for reflection. Once my anger at being locked away had abated, I consoled myself with the thought that I must be a really dangerous criminal. This was reinforced from my first defense counsel. My RKF comrade, Dr. Schramm, did everything he could to lighten my burden in prison, and so came under suspicion by the bloodhounds. He was warned. He ran the risk of being imprisoned himself. His father, high in the justice ministry, then took over my defense. He was a very able man whose calm, reflective nature was a valuable counterbalance to my own exuberant temperament. Examining counsel state authority Dr. Müller did what he could to extract as much as possible from me by efforts exuding goodwill and friendliness, But in this he was only moderately successful. I pick and choose what questions I would answer. I had declared from the outset that I would not talk at all to State Attorney Dessa, the benefactor of the Volkisch movement, and this left Dessa with an unenviable task of interrogating Poner, who had spent many years doing Dessa's job. The state attorney's main interest was what the state considered forbidden. They were not keen on hearing things which we considered much more to the point, such as activities of the state itself, and those of Carr and his companions, insofar as they touched upon the conspiracy. They searched high and low for files and found a lot, but the really sensitive ones, as far as we were concerned, could not be located. They were hidden in an iron safe at district command until the coast was clear, and then they went into the furnaces. I need hardly mention that General von Lossow and his staff and his chief of staff were not aware of this. The remainder of my time at first was given over to making complaints, none of which was successful. On 21 November 1923, I addressed the Bavarian State Supreme Court. For the foregoing reasons, therefore, it appears to me unjustified to hold me in solitary confinement or detain me further, and I request my release under such guarantees and sureties as the court may decide. I must add the following observations which I feel justified and obliged to bring to the attention of the Supreme Court. If the reason for my detention is the danger of collusion, justice demands that the gentlemen Carr, Lossow, and Sicer should also be arrested immediately and brought into protective custody. The legal principle, the same law for all, does not have an exclusion clause for all these personalities. These persons were involved, that is beyond question. In this regard, a great deal of evidence exists to show that originally they collaborated with Hitler's movement. Additionally, a great weight of impartial evidence gives grounds to doubt the reliability of the versions provided by those gentlemen, as aforesaid, regarding the events of 8 and 9 November 1923. Yet what they say has been accepted as true and worthy of belief, which dispenses with any need to subject it to closer examination. In the treatment of these gentlemen, I perceive a different yardstick to the one applied to myself and my friends, and so long as the contrary is not proved to me, a yardstick which bends the law. I request for myself, as a German, the same latitude within the law as is enjoyed by Carr and his associates. I must add the basic question whether we have a German law for all, or if not, what law is being used and who decides what it shall be on German territory. I believe that as a German citizen, I have the right to a clear answer to this question. That the question is justified, the following facts illuminate. Herr von Carr rejected the law of protection for the protection of the Republic for Bavaria. Therefore, it has no force in Bavaria. How can the Reich Constitution still apply to Bavaria? 2. The Reich government dismissed General von Lossow as commander of the 7th Division. The Bavarian government ignored the instruction, kept him in the same position, installed him as military governor of Bavaria, and swore in 7th Division to protect Bavaria. Is that a breach of the Reich Constitution or not? Is Bavaria already independent of the Reich? 3. Will the Bavarian government deny that it knows of the building up of Erhardt's brigades in Bamberg and Coburg, and that it has supported them with money and arms from the state police? I only mention these 3 facts in order to prove that a clear system of law does exist in Bavaria at present. I must therefore be permitted to inquire whether the German court, which will sit in judgment of me, is free and independent to so act, or whether it has to take into account suggestions and instructions from the Commissioner General, or is otherwise subordinate to him or the Bavarian government in one way or another. Moreover, I repeat the unequivocal question: are Carr, General von Lossow, and Colonel von Sicer to be interrogated and judged by the same court? Only if these conditions are fulfilled would I, as a German citizen, whose life hitherto has been devoted to the German fatherland alone, grant a court the right to judge my guilt and sentence. I request a written answer. And pigs might fly, of course. At the end of November, I celebrated my birthday in prison. From elsewhere, and particularly from my brave soldiers, I received letters and presents which pleased me greatly. Numerous visits, numerous visits brought joyful relief to my quiet existence. I was especially honored and pleased by gifts from my regimental commander, Kiefhaber, and Graf du Moulin. My father and mother alternated, come rain or shine, as often as they could, bringing presents and spending the regulation 10 minutes with me. My sister came from Salzburg to spend a few minutes with me, as did my dear sister-in-law, Anneliese. Hotel owner Simon sent a bottle of wine now and again. My childhood friends Liesel Schneider and Paula Schneller brought gifts. The upright editor of the Frankischer Courier, Dr. Hohenstatter, often came with packages of Nuremberg gingerbread. My friend Karl Zettner, owner of the famed Nuremberger Bratwurst Glockels on Frauenplatz, sent large cartons of sausage for myself and my companions. All these presents allowed me to vary the prison diet almost all the time. Two good friends, Weismann, owner of a barber's in Leopoldstrasse, and his assistant Stegmann, provided many necessities for me to keep up appearances. My request for discharge from army service, submitted on 26 September 1923, was approved on 16 December 1923, to take effect on 16 November 1923. On 20 December, I was taken back to Neudeck with Hühnlein, Schleck, and Weber, allegedly to receive Christmas visits, but actually to spare the state attorney the chore of traveling to Stadelheim. As we were hoping privately for our release, my annoyance when Bauer, prison governor, made an unctuous speech of welcome to his establishment, knew no bounds. I vented my anger very thoroughly on Bauer and the state attorney, and was very hard on them both. The conditions at Neudeck did not compare favorably with those at Stadelheim. Thus, I sat down to write the following complaint to the People's Court. I have been transferred today from Stadelheim back to Neudeck. I have now been in custody 6 weeks to prevent collusion, so I have been informed. I pass over the fact that I have now been held 6 weeks in custody unjustifiably, while General von Lossow, for example, remains at liberty. I should at least expect, however, not to have to spend time in a narrow, evil-smelling cell, but be given decent conditions. I therefore request the People's Court for the most urgent transfer to another accommodation, so that I do not have to spend Christmas in these disgusting circumstances. Simultaneously, I ask the state attorney to return me to Stadelheim forthwith. Because the prison governor was quite happy to be rid of me, I arrived back at Stadelheim on the morning of 22 December. Hühnlein and Weber came soon after, but Schreck preferred to stay at Neudeck. While there, I had the chance to speak briefly in the prison yard to Punner, Frick, and Seidel, who were passing their time there without problems. I was moved and uplifted by many Christmas presents which awaited me. Those who have never known imprisonment nowadays in Germany, it is the style to have been locked up at least once, and cannot imagine the joy of the smallest gift. I was very lucky. The loyalty and love of my colleagues and friends made my Christmas at Stadelheim much improved. In my cell, I had a large table set up, stacked with everything the heart could desire. I soon forgot the trip to Neudeck and wrote a few poems to pass the time, including an ode to Dietrich Eckart, the great Völkisch poet, whose works may be better evaluated in a later epoch. Despite his very worrying state of health, he had remained confined to prison. When at last he was released, the damage had been done, and he succumbed to consumption. He was buried at Berchtesgaden on 26 December 1923. At Christmas, Lieutenant Wagner arrived at Stadelheim. This young officer had been prominent on 9 November as leader of the officers who ordered to the infantry school. Hoodline finally left us on 21 January and moved to Landsberg. We all missed him very much. Amongst my visitors were many former NCOs and men whose loyalty I appreciated. Also visiting was Pastor Kreppel of the Christuskirche. In February, Lieutenant Wagner was released but replaced by Ostwald and later Heinz and Fischmeyer. At the end of February, I spent several hours every day with Heinz. On February 25th, 1924, Public Enemy No. 1 was taken in dress uniform to begin the trial process at the infantry school. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to leave it there. We are going to try to finish up. We're going to try to finish this up in part 16 here. We've got basically, let's see here. We're looking at it here. Well, maybe we'll make it into 18. We'll try to finish up pretty soon with that, though. As you can see, there's a lot of detail, a lot of good stuff in that chapter. I like that. So anyway, I will leave it there, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye-bye.